Silas Vale hated galas. He hated the rehearsed smiles, the soft jazz covers of songs that once had bite, the clink of champagne flutes filled with overpriced bubbles and hollow conversations. He especially hated the moment he saw her. Victoria Chase. Wrapped in silver sequins, every blonde wave perfectly pinned, her fingers lightly resting on the arm of a man Silas didn't recognize, but instantly despised. Of course, she would show up with a replacement. Silas's jaw tightened. His scotch burned down his throat like a challenge. Silas. Her voice floated across the marble floor like smoke, sweet, practiced, laced with just enough condescension to make it sound like concern. You look alone. He turned to face her. Cool. Controlled. Every inch the billionaire the world expected. And you look accessorized, he said, glancing at the man beside her. Victoria laughed. A tinkling sound that used to make his chest warm and now just grated. This is Preston. My fiancé. Fiancé. The word hit him like ice water down the spine. Not because he wanted her back, God, no, but because she'd beaten him to it. Rewritten the narrative. He was the one who ended things, but now she was the one who'd moved on better. Preston extended a hand. Silas didn't take it. Congrats, he said coolly, eyes locked on Victoria's. Didn't take long. Life's short, she said, sipping her champagne. Why wait? And just like that, they were gone. Swallowed by a crowd of people who would clap at anything in a tux. Silas's glass cracked under the pressure of his grip. Later that night, he found himself at Thorn, a rooftop bar in Midtown with too much ambience and not enough darkness. He rarely drank in public, but tonight felt like an exception. His inner circle, 2 tech CEOs and a hedge fund guy, filled the leather booth around him, tossing back tequila and laughs. Silas didn't hear a word. His mind kept replaying Victoria's smug smile. You look like someone pissed in your inheritance, one of them joked. Silas was about to offer a cutting remark when it happened. A splash. Cold. Wet. Citrus. And a very loud, very female shit. He looked down at his $1,000 suit, now baptized in what smelled like lime and vodka. Then he looked up. She was all curves and chaos. Wild auburn waves in a high ponytail, a smudge of lipstick on her cheekbone, black tank top clinging to skin kissed by the sun, and eyes like molten whiskey that dared him to react. I'm so sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Someone bumped me. You threw a drink on me, Silas said, voice calm but lethal. Her gaze didn't waver. And yet, here you are. Still alive. Tragic. One of his friends snorted. The other 2 just stared at her like she was a zoo animal let loose in the wrong exhibit. I'll get napkins, she added, spinning on her heel. Silas's eyes trailed down her back. Sharp tongue. Dangerous body. No filter. Not his type at all. And suddenly, precisely what he needed. When she returned, he took the napkins without a word, dabbing at his shirt. She hovered, hands on hips. You gonna yell at me, Mr. Armani? Or are you one of those guys who files complaints with Yelp? He smirked. What's your name? Roxy. Roxy, he repeated, like it was a brand of poison he'd just tasted. Tell me something. How do you feel about playing pretend? She raised an eyebrow. You into roleplay, Mr. Broody? Silas. Silas Vale. Her lips parted. Recognition flickered, then faded. Should I care? That earned his first genuine smile of the night. I need a girlfriend, he said bluntly. She blinked. You're kidding. 1 month. Appearances. Events. PDA when required. $50,000. She stared at him like he'd grown horns. You want me to fake date you? Yes. You just met me. I don't need sweet, he said. I need sharp. You're sharp. You're fire. You'll piss off exactly the right people. She crossed her arms, studying him. You think 50 grand buys that kind of crazy? He leaned forward, voice low. I think everyone has a price. She was quiet for a beat. Then, 75. And I pick the clothes. No touching unless I initiate. Silas blinked. She stepped closer, her voice a sultry purr against the buzz of the rooftop. Just so we're clear, she said, eyes glittering with challenge, I'm not your toy. I'm your illusion. And I don't come cheap, Mr. Broody. He exhaled, something hot and dangerous stirring in his gut. Deal. The gallery was an ocean of glass, velvet, and strategically placed lighting, each piece of art more self-important than the next, and every person in attendance somehow more hollow than the last. Silas Vale didn't blink as he cut through the crowd like a knife through silk, tailored in a midnight black suit and armed with a stare that made people forget their names. The murmurs had already started. He could hear them fluttering behind fans and champagne flutes. Is that Silas Vale? He hasn't been to an event since Victoria. Who's the redhead on his arm? Correction, not yet on his arm. He hadn't seen Roxy since they signed their arrangement, 3 days ago. Not a word, not a text. Just the address of the gala, the time, and a vague warning to bring a fire extinguisher. He didn't expect her to actually light him on fire. But there she was, descending the marble staircase like a damn goddess of destruction, wrapped in a slinky, blood-red dress that clung to every curve like a sin that begged to be confessed. Her hair was swept to one side, revealing a column of throat that made him momentarily forget why oxygen was important. A slit ran up her leg high enough to make his mouth dry, and then she looked right at him, smirked, and strutted over like she owned the building. Mr. Broody, she drawled, voice like smoke and velvet, looking sharp enough to wound. Roxy, he said, managing not to gape. Barely. You clean up. I do everything dirty, she whispered, brushing past him to loop her arm through his. Ready to make rich people uncomfortable? You already are. They moved through the gallery together, the very picture of opposites in sync. He, all sharp edges and practiced control. She, all hips, heels, and wicked charm. She laughed too loud, touched him too much, and called him ridiculous pet names that made him grit his teeth, and yet, he played along. God help him, he liked it. Silas. A woman he barely knew stopped them, kissing him with a smile full of teeth. And, your friend? Girlfriend, Roxy said, stepping forward and slipping her hand under his blazer, palm resting lightly against his chest. I'm Roxy. The reason he's smiling these days. Silas nearly choked. He hadn't even realized he was smiling. The woman blinked, her polite expression faltering as her eyes dipped to the way Roxy clung to him, like she had every right to be there. Oh! How unexpected. That's kind of my thing, Roxy said sweetly, and Silas could feel her nails grazing his chest through the fabric. They moved on, drink after drink, encounter after encounter, each one sharpening the edge of their illusion. But it didn't feel like an illusion. Roxy was magnetic. She leaned into him like she belonged there, cracked jokes that made him laugh, actually laugh, and whispered things in his ear that made it hard to focus on anything but her breath on his neck. You know, she murmured at one point, her fingers playing idly with his tie as they paused near a giant steel sculpture, if you're going to sell the fantasy, you might want to stop looking at me like you want to bend me over the nearest Picasso. He looked down at her, eyes dark. Stop saying things like that if you don't want me to try. Her lips parted slightly surprised. But then she smirked. Duly noted. An hour later, they stepped onto the balcony for air, or, in Silas's case, sanity. The city lights stretched out below them, but all he could see was the woman leaning against the railing, drink in hand, daring the wind to ruin her perfect hair. I have to admit, she said without looking at him, this is more fun than I thought. You were expecting torture? I was expecting cold stares, stiff protocol, and pretending to laugh at hedge fund jokes. He stepped beside her, close but not touching. Disappointed? Actually, she turned her head, eyes catching his in the soft glow of the balcony lights. You're not half bad when you stop trying so hard not to feel anything. He didn't answer. Didn't know how to. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing her hip lightly, testing, unsure if it was part of the act or something else entirely. She didn't pull away. The air thickened. The hum of the city below became distant. Every second stretched like honey until the only thing either of them could feel was want. Just for the cameras, he murmured. Right, she whispered back. He cupped her face gently, tilted her chin up. Their mouths met in a kiss that was supposed to be for show, except it didn't feel like a performance. Not even close. Her lips were warm and plush, moving against his like they already knew the rhythm. Her fingers slid into his hair, anchoring him, and his hand found her waist, dragging her impossibly close. There were no cameras. There was no crowd. Just Roxy, soft and wild and dangerous in his arms. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, she blinked up at him with a slow smile. If that was fake, she murmured, "You deserve an Oscar." He didn't speak. Couldn't. He was too busy wondering when exactly the lines between real and pretend had started to blur, and what the hell he was going to do about it. Silas Vale's penthouse was everything Roxy Lane expected from a billionaire, and somehow, so much less. It was perched above the skyline like a glass and steel fortress, gleaming with sleek surfaces, minimalist decor, and an emptiness that screamed lonely rich guy with control issues. The foyer alone was the size of her entire apartment. She stepped inside with her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, boots echoing against the polished floors. No photos. No clutter. No warmth. She whistled low. Wow! I've seen serial killer lairs with more personality. Silas shut the door behind her, unamused. You're staying here for convenience, not comfort. Well, that's obvious, she muttered, dropping her bag onto a cream velvet bench that looked like it had never been sat on. He passed her without a word and strode toward the hall, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, looking like some cover model for Hostile Takeover Monthly. She followed, glancing around as they walked through the living room, floor-to-ceiling windows, pristine leather couches, art that probably cost more than her life but made 0 sense. Is that a giant metal rectangle? It's a statement piece. Yeah, it's making a statement all right. It says, "I have no joy in my life and I cry into artisanal whiskey." He paused mid-step. Are you always like this? Only when I'm breathing. They reached the bedroom wing and Silas stopped in front of a door. This is the guest room. You'll have your privacy. Roxy raised an eyebrow, stepping past him to open the door, only to find a space full of boxes and construction tools. He frowned. I forgot it's being renovated. She peeked inside, snorting. By the looks of it, it's being exorcised. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Fine, take the bed. I'll use the couch. Her brows shot up. Oh, I am taking the bed. But thanks for making it sound like such a noble sacrifice. He didn't rise to the bait. Just nodded stiffly and walked off toward the living room like a soldier accepting his fate. By the time midnight rolled around, Roxy was sprawled in his obscenely soft bed, wearing one of her oversized vintage tees and boy shorts, hair loose around her shoulders, and very, very awake. She couldn't stop thinking about the kiss. The way his hands had tightened around her waist. The way he'd kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. It was supposed to be fake. She'd known that. But her body hadn't gotten the memo. After 30 minutes of staring at the ceiling, she gave up and padded barefoot toward the kitchen. She found him already there. Silas leaned against the island in sweatpants and a black t-shirt that clung to his frame like it had been painted on. A bottle of wine was open beside him, 2 glasses already poured. He looked up when she entered, and something unreadable flickered across his face. You always drink alone at night? She asked, hopping onto a stool. Only when I can't sleep. Trouble letting go of control, Mr. Broody? He handed her a glass. Trouble dealing with smart mouths. She clinked hers against his. Cheers to being inconvenient. They sipped in silence for a beat. Then she glanced around the cavernous kitchen, gleaming steel appliances, not a crumb out of place. This place is gorgeous, she said. And soulless. I prefer order. You prefer sterile, she shot back. This place looks like it's afraid to be lived in. He quirked an eyebrow. And your apartment, I assume, is a haven of chaos and color? Hell yeah, she said proudly. Books, candles, paint splatters, mismatched mugs. Life. You should try it sometime. I prefer control over chaos. You say that, but you hired me. She smirked over the rim of her glass. I'm chaos with legs. Silas's gaze dropped to those legs, exposed beneath the hem of her oversized t-shirt, and lingered. Just a moment too long. Her smirk faltered. Heat sparked between them like the slow-burning tip of a fuse. I hired you, he said, voice low, because you're the perfect illusion. Funny, she murmured. You keep saying I'm fake, but I'm starting to think I'm the only real thing in your world. Something shifted in the air. The wine, the hour, the proximity. He stepped closer. She didn't back away. His hand brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath caught, eyes locking with his. She could smell his skin, clean, expensive, maddening. This is a bad idea, he said, though his fingers were still touching her. Most fun things are, she whispered back. Their mouths were inches apart. The moment stretched, thick and trembling, their energy buzzing like a live wire. Then, bzzzzzzzzz. Silas jerked back as his phone vibrated harshly on the counter. He glanced at it, jaw ticking. Business, he muttered, snatching the phone and walking away, voice already clipped and professional. Roxy stared after him, lips tingling. She slid off the stool, poured herself another glass of wine, and muttered, "Business can kiss my ass." And the bed never felt colder than it did when she climbed back into it alone. The gala was hosted at the old Langford estate, now converted into an elite event space that oozed money from every corner. Crystal chandeliers cast soft golden light over the marble floors, and the air was thick with perfume, wealth, and the sound of well-practiced laughter. Silas Vale adjusted the cufflinks on his charcoal suit, his expression carved from stone as always, but his posture just slightly more rigid than usual, because he knew she'd be there. Victoria. And she was. He spotted her the moment they walked in, tall and polished, wearing a deep emerald gown that clung like a second skin. Her golden hair was swept into a graceful chignon, and her lips curved with something between nostalgia and victory the second she saw him. But Silas wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Roxy. She stood beside him in a black silk gown with a dangerously low back and a thigh-high slit that made turning heads a sport. Her curls were tamed tonight, cascading down one shoulder, and her smoky eye makeup made her look like trouble with a countdown. She leaned in close, whispering near his ear as they made their entrance. X alert. 2 o'clock. With the smug smirk and way too much contour. I see her, he murmured. Want me to cause a scene? I'm very good at those. He glanced at her, a smirk tugging at his lips. Not yet. Roxy grinned, looping her arm through his as cameras flashed. Then let the games begin. For the first hour, they played the part perfectly. Roxy was on fire, laughing too loud, kissing his cheek just a second too long, running her nails up his arm when people watched. Silas, to his own shock, found himself enjoying it. Enjoying her. She didn't simper. She didn't preen. She didn't stand next to him like a fragile ornament. She commanded the room. With sass, wit, and a magnetic energy that refused to dim. Victoria circled. Always just a few steps away. Always watching. When Silas stepped away for a quick word with the event sponsor, he returned to find Roxy laughing in the arms of another man, a European investor named Daniel something, tall, sleek, and far too interested. They were dancing. Roxy's hand on his shoulder, her body swaying with the music, lips parted as she threw her head back in laughter. She caught Silas's eye across the dance floor and winked. It wasn't part of the plan. And it worked too damn well. Jealousy hit him like a gut punch. Hot. Fast. Irrational. Silas moved before he could think, striding across the floor with a possessive energy he couldn't even pretend to mask. He reached them just as Daniel leaned in too close, his hand dangerously low on Roxy's waist. Mind if I cut in? Silas's voice was polite, deadly polite. Daniel blinked. We're done, Roxy interrupted sweetly, stepping away and letting Silas take her hand. Duty calls. He didn't speak as he led her off the floor, threading them through the crowd until they were in one of the estate's side corridors, dimly lit and deserted. She pulled her hand from his, eyebrows arched. Something you'd like to say, Mr. Broody? What the hell was that? That, she said, stepping closer, was me playing my part. You know, the sexy, chaotic girlfriend meant to make your ex regret leaving. She already regrets it, he growled. I don't need you grinding on Europe's most eligible bachelor to seal the deal. She tilted her head. Are you seriously jealous right now? He said nothing. Oh my God, you are. She laughed, soft and amused. That's rich. You were supposed to be with me tonight, he said, voice rough now. Not giving private shows to someone else. Roxy stepped into his space, close enough to smell the clean spice of his cologne. Silas. It's fake. Remember? He stared down at her, jaw clenched, eyes dark. It doesn't feel fake, he muttered. And then he grabbed her. There was no warning, no build-up. Just heat and hands and mouths colliding in a kiss that slammed into her like a freight train. She gasped, and he took the opportunity, slipping his tongue between her lips like he had every right. His hands gripped her waist, dragging her against the hard lines of his body, and her fingers curled into his shirt, anchoring herself as the world fell away. It was wild, desperate, possessive. It wasn't staged. She moaned into his mouth just once, and he answered with a groan that came from somewhere deep in his chest. When he finally broke the kiss, they were both breathless. His forehead pressed to hers. Don't dance with other men. Her fingers still curled around his collar. You don't own me. I know. His voice cracked, softer now. But when you smile at someone else like that, it makes me want to throw a chair. She stared up. The estate was nestled in the Berkshires, hidden behind iron gates, and surrounded by acres of pine and silence. A sprawling modern retreat with stone walls, glass panels, and a view that stretched out over a frozen lake like something out of a dream. Or a very expensive ad for designer cologne. Roxy stepped out of the sleek black SUV in her oversized hoodie, black leggings, and combat boots, blinking up at the house with a low whistle. You know, she said, turning to Silas as he followed her out of the car, I was fully expecting Dracula's summer home. This is borderline romantic. It's isolated, he said simply, walking ahead with his usual military precision. No press. No noise. No soul either, she muttered under her breath. But as the front door swung open and warm wood, low lighting, and the scent of cedar wrapped around her, she softened. It did feel different here. Less sterile. More lived in. Still minimalist, but the kind of quiet that whispered instead of screamed. He led her into the main living space, a sunken room with plush furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a fireplace already crackling to life. A chilled bottle of wine waited on the coffee table beside 2 glasses. Okay, I'm slightly impressed, she admitted. Good, Silas said. You'll need that energy tomorrow. The hosts are old friends of my father's. Political. Curious. Do I need to wear pearls and pretend to care about tax reform? Just smile. Pretend I'm charming. That's a stretch, she muttered, but her lips curved. Later that night, after a quiet dinner and a successful show of public affection in front of the estate's weekend guests, Roxy padded barefoot into the great room in one of Silas's oversized button-down shirts, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. The fire was still glowing, casting gold across the space. Silas was already there, sitting on the floor beside it with his sleeves pushed up and a tumbler of whiskey in hand. Couldn't sleep? She asked. He shook his head once, gaze flicking to her bare legs. You're going to drive me insane. That's the idea. She sat beside him, legs folded under her. He passed her the whiskey. She took a sip and winced. Jesus. That's not whiskey, that's pain in a glass. Silas let out the faintest chuckle. My father's favorite. He believed if it didn't burn, it wasn't worth drinking. You and your dad must have been close, she said, voice casual but watching him closely. His jaw tightened. Not exactly. She didn't push. Just passed the glass back and pulled her knees up to her chest. My mom used to hide money in cereal boxes, she offered quietly. That's how we paid the gas bill some months. She'd wait until my deadbeat dad passed out, then go hunting through his pockets. Survival was a scavenger hunt. Silas looked at her for a long moment, something soft and unreadable in his eyes. You don't talk about your family much. Neither do you. He shifted, eyes fixed on the flames. My father was a machine. Efficiency over empathy. Success was everything. My mother left when I was 9. He told everyone she died. Didn't even correct me when I believed it for years. Roxy's breath hitched. That's cruel. He didn't believe in softness. Or attachments. Or love. Explains a lot, she said gently. But you're not him. He looked at her then, really looked. Sometimes I feel like I am. You're not. You hired me, remember? I am the antithesis of your father's entire vibe. His lips twitched. That you are. She bumped her shoulder against his. You're a pain in the ass, Vale. But I don't think you're broken. He was silent for a long beat. Then, I think I was. Until you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Heavy. Honest. Neither of them spoke as they stood, as they moved to the back patio and stepped into the bubbling hot tub under the stars. Snow dusted the edges of the deck, but the water was blissfully warm. Steam rose around them like a veil. Roxy leaned back, eyes closed, arms draped along the edge. This is nice. Silas didn't respond. He was too busy watching the way the moonlight played on her skin, the way water clung to her collarbone, the soft sigh that escaped her lips as she sank deeper into the heat. He moved closer. She opened her eyes, and the air between them shifted. Are we still pretending? She asked, voice low. He reached out, brushed a droplet from her cheek. I don't know what this is anymore. Then he kissed her. It wasn't soft. It was everything he'd been holding back, urgent, deep, consuming. She moaned into his mouth, wrapping her arms around his neck as his hands slid under the water, gripping her waist and pulling her into his lap. Heat. Tongues. Teeth. Hands exploring bare skin beneath water. She rocked her hips once and he groaned, fingers digging into her thighs like he was on the edge of unraveling. Silas, she whispered, breathless against his lips. He pulled back, chest heaving, jaw clenched tight. If we do this, he growled, voice hoarse and thick with want, there's no going back. She held his gaze, lips parted, heart pounding. And then, I'm not afraid of forward, she whispered. But he leaned his forehead against hers, shutting his eyes. I am. They stayed like that. Breathing. Burning. Balanced on the edge of something dangerous. And neither of them could pretend it was just a game anymore. New York's skyline greeted them like nothing had changed, but everything had. The moment Roxy stepped back into Silas's penthouse, she knew the air between them had thickened, charged, sharp, pulsing with the aftermath of something unfinished. They hadn't touched since the hot tub. No more stolen glances. No more shared silences. Just a growing, unbearable tension that pressed between them like a wire pulled too tight. Roxy had never struggled to remember who she was. Loud, bold, independent. But now, every time Silas looked at her, she felt like someone else. Someone reckless. Someone on the verge. She told herself it was just a job. Told herself that this wasn't her life, it was a role. But when he passed behind her in the kitchen and his hand barely grazed the small of her back, she shivered like he'd branded her. She hated it. She wanted more of it. So when he barely acknowledged her the next morning, muttering something about meetings and schedules before leaving in a rush, she forced herself to breathe. To stay grounded. She had a photo shoot scheduled, part of the ruse. A lifestyle magazine spread featuring Silas and his new girlfriend. Paparazzi bait. All she had to do was show up, smile, and look like she belonged in his world. But Silas didn't show. And neither did his team. She sat on set for over an hour, in full makeup, legs crossed in a designer dress, fighting the urge to hurl one of the cameras across the room. By the time she stormed back into the penthouse, hair tousled, heels clicking like gunshots on the floor, she was vibrating with fury. Silas was in the living room, casually scrolling through emails on his tablet, sleeves rolled up and looking irritatingly unbothered. You forgot me, she snapped. He looked up slowly. What are you talking about? The shoot, she hissed. The one you set up. I sat there for an hour like some abandoned mannequin while you played CEO of the Year. Silas's expression darkened. Something came up. You could have called. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot I'm on your payroll, not your priority list, she said, throwing her bag onto the nearest chair. How silly of me. Don't start with me, Roxy. Start with what, Silas? The fact that you can't even be bothered to show up for your own facade? Or the fact that every time you get too close, you pull away like I'm some mistake you're trying not to make? He stood then, slow and dangerous, like a panther deciding whether to pounce. Don't twist this into something it's not. Oh, sweetheart, she said with a bitter smile. It already is. He crossed the room in 3 long strides until they were face to face. You wanted rules. You set the boundaries. And you blew past every single one. Because you make me forget them, he snapped. Every damn time you walk into a room, you throw my control into a blender and hit crush. She swallowed hard. Her heart was pounding in her throat. Then admit it. Admit that this isn't pretend anymore. His hands clenched at his sides. She turned to walk away. And he caught her wrist. The second he touched her, the fight cracked wide open. He pulled her back against him, mouth crashing to hers with a force that stole her breath. It wasn't polite. It wasn't sweet. It was fire and fury, and every unsaid word between them crashing into a kiss that devoured and demanded. Her fingers clawed at his shirt. His hands slid to her hips, gripping hard enough to bruise. She moaned when he lifted her, spun her, and pinned her to the wall, lips trailing down her jaw, her throat, her collarbone. Tell me to stop, he rasped against her skin. She didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she gripped the back of his neck, pulled him back up, and kissed him like he was the last bad decision she'd ever make. Later, in the bedroom, they didn't undress each other. They tore each other apart. Buttons popped. Zippers snarled. Clothes hit the floor in a trail that led to the bed like a breadcrumb path to chaos. Silas was fire and precision. Roxy was heat and hunger. And when they finally came together, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate. Unapologetic. Perfect. After, he lay beside her, chest rising and falling fast, one hand tangled in her hair, the other tracing slow, absent-minded circles on her bare thigh. Neither spoke. Because words would ruin it. Because the truth had already crashed into them, uninvited and undeniable. This wasn't fake anymore. And nothing about tonight could be undone. The storm came on a Wednesday. Gray clouds hung over Manhattan like a warning, but inside Vale Tower, everything was business as usual, glass walls gleaming, assistants buzzing like bees, and Silas locked in a conference room with 3 partners, 2 attorneys, and the kind of headache that made him crave scotch before noon. Until the door opened. And in walked the storm. Victoria. Her heels clicked across the hardwood like memory. Her eyes, once calculating and calm, now rimmed red with smudged mascara. Her designer coat hung off her shoulders like an afterthought, and her hands trembled as she dropped her purse on the nearest chair. Silas, she said, voice cracking. His heart stuttered for a half-second, not from longing, but from shock. He stood slowly, dismissing the room with a glance. They all knew better than to ask. When the door clicked shut behind them, he turned to her. What the hell are you doing here? Her lip quivered. It's over. Preston and I, it's done. He cheated. On me. With his secretary, if you can believe the cliché. He folded his arms, keeping a wall between them. I'm sorry to hear that. She looked at him, wounded and wide-eyed. You're not. No, he said honestly. I'm not. That should have been it. Clean. Civil. But Victoria had always been a professional in emotional warfare. I made a mistake, Silas, she whispered, stepping closer. You were always the one. I was just too afraid to admit it. But I see it now. I feel it. Being with him showed me what I lost. And what I still want. His spine straightened, breath catching, but not with hope. With caution. Victoria. She didn't wait. She surged forward and kissed him. It was a ghost of a kiss, familiar in shape, foreign in feeling. Her lips were soft, desperate, seeking something that didn't live in him anymore. And just as quickly as it happened, it was shattered by the sound of the door swinging open. Roxy, her heels stilled on the tile. Her eyes flicked from Victoria to Silas, lips pressed in a flat, unreadable line. She looked stunning. Jeans, leather jacket, curls tousled from the wind. And for the first time since he met her, she looked guarded. She arched a brow. Hope I'm not interrupting something sacred. Roxy. But she held up a hand, cool and calm. Too calm. Save it. Just came to drop this off. She held up an envelope, details for an upcoming gala they were supposed to attend together. Figured your assistant could use it. Rox, he said again, voice strained. She walked toward his desk, every step precise, every breath deliberate. She dropped the envelope, then looked up at him, through him. Victoria lingered in the corner like a ghost still waiting for a pulse. Roxy smiled, lips sharp. You really know how to pick your moments, Vale. I didn't kiss her. Doesn't matter, she said softly. You let her. And then she was gone. She didn't answer his texts that night. Or his calls. Or the knock on her apartment door when he tried 2 hours later. Because she wasn't there. She'd gone to her sister's across the city. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that didn't smell like Silas's cologne or echo with the sound of his voice saying her name like it meant something. She sat on a couch too small and a throw blanket too itchy and stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to remember how it felt before all this. Before him. Before she knew what it was like to be wanted, not as a weapon, not as an illusion, but as herself. And worst of all, she missed him. God help her, she missed him like a part of her had been ripped out and replaced with silence. Back at the penthouse, Silas stared out the window, jaw tight, drink in hand. Victoria was gone. No drama, no tears this time. She'd seen the look in his eyes when Roxy walked out. Knew it was over before it began. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss. Because in that moment, in that split second when Roxy's eyes met his and turned to stone, Silas realized something he should have figured out long ago. He didn't feel anything for Victoria. But Roxy? Roxy was fire and ache and truth. And he'd just watched her walk away. He didn't chase her. Not yet. Because he didn't want to say the wrong thing. He wanted to say everything. But he knew this time. It had to be real. The restaurant was elegant in the kind of way that made everything feel staged, too symmetrical, too quiet, too expensive for comfort. Crystal glassware sparkled under ambient lighting, and a pianist played something soft and classical in the corner, a tune that had no soul, no edge, no voice. Silas sat across from Victoria at a private table tucked beneath a velvet-curtained alcove. She looked exactly as he remembered, glossy blonde hair swept up, makeup pristine, posture impeccable. Her dress was emerald silk, a deliberate callback to the gala. Her smile was soft and warm, the perfect shade of regret. I'm glad you agreed to meet, she said, taking a sip of wine. I know how much you value your time. He nodded. You said you wanted to talk. I wanted to. Reset, she said gently. I know things didn't end well between us. But I've had time to reflect. I see now that we worked better than I realized. I was scared, Silas. Scared of how serious we got. But maybe that wasn't fear, maybe it was love, and I just didn't recognize it. Silas stared at her, unblinking. The words should have meant something. Once upon a time, they would have. He'd built so much of his life around control, and Victoria had always fit into that world like a perfect puzzle piece. Polished, poised, predictable. She never stirred the pot, never raised her voice, never made him feel anything he couldn't compartmentalize. But now? He felt nothing. He sipped his scotch slowly, letting the burn hit his tongue before he responded. You really think what we had was love? She blinked. Don't you? And for a brief moment, he tried to reach for it. That echo, that sliver of familiarity that might justify this dinner, this conversation, this possibility. But his mind betrayed him. It didn't go to late nights wrapped in silk sheets or holiday parties filled with laughter and practiced charm. It went to Roxy. to the way her laughter filled a room like firecrackers, to the way she called him Mr. Broody with that smug little grin, to the way she moaned his name with her thighs clenched around his hips. His jaw tightened. Victoria kept talking about plans and time lost and maybe trying again, but he was already drifting, drowning in memories that hit like flashes of lightning. Roxy in his kitchen at midnight, eating peanut butter from the jar, challenging him to loosen the hell up. Roxy with her head tipped back in laughter at the gala, drawing every eye, daring the world to look at her. Roxy in his arms, panting his name against his lips, her body trembling beneath his. She made him feel everything. She made him forget the rules. She made him human. He blinked back to the present and saw Victoria watching him expectantly, waiting for something. An answer. A promise. A hint of who he used to be with her. And all he had to offer was honesty. I think I loved the idea of you, he said quietly. Not you. Her face faltered. Excuse me? I loved the structure you gave me. The neatness. You never challenged me, never broke the system I built for myself. He leaned back, eyes sharp but not cruel. It wasn't love. It was comfort. Victoria's composure cracked just slightly, her breath catching. So that's it. That's it. She stood slowly, smoothing down her dress with trembling hands. I hope she's worth it. She is. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Victoria nodded once and walked away, heels clicking against marble, and Silas watched her go with the strange peace of someone who'd finally opened the wrong door just to see what wasn't there. When he left the restaurant, the city air was sharp and cold, but it cut through the fog in his mind like a blade. He slid into the back seat of his car and gave the driver one word. Home. But he wasn't thinking of the penthouse. He was thinking of Roxy. Of how he hadn't seen her in 3 days. How she hadn't returned a single message. How the apartment still smelled like her shampoo in the mornings. How his hands still remembered the shape of her hips when he closed his eyes. And how no amount of money, power, or control could get her back if he didn't do the one thing that terrified him most. Feel. He looked out the window, the city blurring into streaks of light and memory. Roxy was chaos. Emotion. Fire. She wasn't a puzzle piece. She was a fucking spark. And if he didn't do something soon, he was going to lose the one person who'd ever made him want to burn. The bar was loud, gritty, and smelled like spilled beer and desperation. Exactly where Roxy belonged. It was a dive nestled between a tattoo parlor and a boarded-up bookstore, the kind of place where neon signs flickered like half-hearted promises and the jukebox was always one sad country song away from breaking down completely. Roxy wiped down the bar with practiced ease, her worn Guns N' Roses tee knotted at her waist, dark jeans hugging her hips. Her curls were piled on top of her head in a messy bun that screamed I don't care, but the smudge of red on her lips said otherwise. She hadn't slept much since walking out of Silas Vale's office. Hadn't wanted to. The image of Victoria kissing him was burned into her brain, too vivid, too cruel. And even though she hadn't seen him since, part of her still expected him to show up. Like a ghost. Like a mistake she wasn't ready to make again. So when the door creaked open and the air shifted like gravity recognizing something heavier walking in, her heart stuttered. And there he was. Silas Vale. Towering in the doorway in a dark coat, rain misting his shoulders, his sharp jaw tight, his blue eyes locked on her like he hadn't seen light in weeks. Roxy didn't blink. She turned her back to him and grabbed a fresh towel. You're not welcome here, she said flatly. Doesn't mean I'm not staying. You think money gets you whatever you want, she said, turning around, fire already sparking in her chest. But not tonight, Vale. Not from me. I don't want your performance, he said, stepping forward. I want you. She let out a humorless laugh. You want me now? After your ex used your face like a tissue and I walked in on it. I didn't kiss her. But you didn't stop her either. Her voice cracked. You let her try. Because somewhere deep down, you wanted to see if you still fit. Silas's jaw flexed. Maybe I did. For a second. I thought she was safe. Familiar. But then I saw you, and every part of me realized I was wrong. Roxy crossed her arms, leaning against the bar. You don't get to fall in love now that it's inconvenient. Now that it's messy. I'm not falling in love, Roxy, he said quietly. I already did. The bar was suddenly too quiet. The jukebox had paused, and the only sound was the dull hum of the cooler beneath the counter. Roxy stared at him, chest tight, hands clenched. I'm not some shiny thing you pick up when the one you really want doesn't work out, she said. I'm not a placeholder. I'm not a rebound. And I'm sure as hell not a second chance. You were never second, Silas said. You were the first time I ever felt anything real. Her throat burned, but she didn't let it show. And now what? You want me to what, just forgive you? Pretend like none of it happened? That you didn't make me feel like I was disposable? No, he said, taking another step. I want to earn it. Whatever it takes. No contracts. No pretending. Just us. Messy. Raw. Real. Her voice was a whisper now. Why me? Because you saw through me. Because you challenged me. Because when you laughed, I felt like the world wasn't so damn hollow. He exhaled, shaking his head. Because I kissed you and forgot everything else existed. Because when you left, it felt like oxygen had followed you out the door. Roxy bit her lip. It wasn't enough. Not yet. She took a deep breath and smiled, cold, beautiful, devastating. You're going to have to do better than poetic speeches in shitty bars. I know. She nodded once. Then go. Silas stared at her like he didn't know how to walk away from something he wasn't ready to lose. But he did. Because Roxy Lane wasn't someone you convinced. She was someone you proved yourself to. And he was ready to prove everything. The envelope was thick. Cream-colored. Embossed with gold foil and her full name in looping, elegant script. Roxanne Lane. Roxy stared at it like it was radioactive. It had arrived at the bar in a velvet-lined courier's box, handed off by a nervous-looking delivery guy who kept glancing at the Harley parked outside like it might explode. She tore it open, heart pounding despite herself. The New York City Philanthropic Society cordially invites you to an evening honoring Silas Vale. Her name appeared again further down the page, in celebration of the Lane Initiative for Women in Crisis. Roxy sat down hard on the nearest barstool. She hadn't spoken to Silas in over a week. Not since she threw his desperate speech back in his face and told him to walk. And yet, here it was. A foundation. Named after her. The kind of initiative that would fund shelters, job training, and emergency services for women who'd been through what her mother had survived. What she'd survived. No announcement. No press release. No warning. Just a quiet gesture with thunder in its footsteps. The gala was held in a glass atrium filled with hanging orchids and star-shaped chandeliers. The kind of place where people wore diamonds the size of nickels and talked in low voices about six-figure donations like it was gossip over tea. Roxy stepped into the room like a detonation. Her gown was black velvet, strapless and wicked, clinging to her like smoke. Her hair spilled in waves over her bare shoulders, and her lips were painted the deep, dangerous red of sins whispered in the dark. Heads turned. Eyes followed. But she only had one person on her radar. And there he was. Silas Vale, standing near the dais, tall and sharp in a bespoke black tux. Clean-shaven. Hair a little messy, like he hadn't bothered taming it tonight. He looked powerful. Beautiful. Wrecked. His gaze met hers across the room, and in that moment, the whole damn party could have caught fire, and she wouldn't have looked away. He didn't approach her. He waited. Because he knew she was only here for one reason. To see if he meant it. The event flowed around them, champagne, murmured introductions, clinking glasses. But Roxy didn't move from the edge of the room. Then a voice cut through the buzz. Ladies and gentlemen, the host said, tapping a mic, tonight, we honor not only a leader in industry, but a man whose recent philanthropic initiative has stunned even our most seasoned members. Silas walked up to the podium slowly, buttoning his jacket, his expression unreadable until he faced the crowd. I'm not good at this, he began, and there was a ripple of polite laughter. I've spent most of my life avoiding anything that felt human. I kept things clinical, neat, predictable, because it was safe. He glanced around the room. His eyes stopped on Roxy and stayed there. But then I met someone who made me realize safety isn't living. That chaos isn't the enemy, it's proof you're alive. That emotions, even the messy, terrifying ones, mean you're finally awake. A hush fell. Silas swallowed, jaw tight. But his voice stayed steady. I created the Lane Initiative not because I wanted to be applauded, but because someone showed me what real strength looks like. What fire looks like. He took a breath. I fell in love with a woman who flipped my world upside down with one sarcastic smile and a pair of combat boots. She called me out on my bullshit. She made me laugh when I didn't remember how. She kissed me like she wanted to start wars and walked away like I wasn't the one bleeding. Roxy's breath caught. Silas scanned the crowd. She's here tonight. And I don't care how many people are watching. Because I want her to know that this whole thing, it's for her. Every brick. Every dollar. Every breath. Silence. Not a camera clicked. Not a whisper dared break the moment. I don't want a contract, Silas said, voice low, raw. I want a life. With her chaos. Her heat. Her heart. Because Roxy Lane, you're the only thing that ever melted my frozen world. For a second, no one moved. And then applause broke out like thunder. But Roxy didn't hear it. She was already walking. Fast. Straight toward him. Silas stepped down from the podium just as she reached him. He opened his mouth. But she grabbed the lapels of his tux and pulled him down into a kiss that sent gasps through the room. A kiss that wasn't fake. A kiss that didn't give a damn about society, timing, or control. When she pulled back, her eyes were glossy, but her voice was steady. You ridiculous, stupid, sexy man, she whispered. You finally said something that made sense. His lips curved. Only took losing you to figure out how to speak. You didn't lose me, she said, fingers still clutching his jacket. You just had to earn me. And he had. Every chaotic, fiery, beautiful inch. The night air hit Roxy like a slap, cool, sharp, full of tension she couldn't quite swallow. She walked fast, heels clicking across the cobblestone drive of the estate's entrance, breath shallow and fists clenched around the tiny velvet clutch she'd nearly cracked in half. It had been too much. Too perfect. Too Silas. Of course he had to make a damn speech in front of 100 people. Of course he had to turn her into a poetic declaration and a living cause. And the worst part? It worked. It worked so well that it scared the hell out of her. So she left. Before the applause stopped echoing. Before he could reach her. Before her knees gave out in front of everyone. She stood now near the edge of the circular drive, heels sinking into the gravel, yanking one off and cursing as she paced in a wide, angry arc. Her hair was slipping out of its curls. Her lipstick was probably smudged. Her heart was thundering like a war drum. Roxy. She froze at the sound of his voice. Spoke too soon. Silas emerged from the doors like a storm given shape, tie loose, expression wild, desperation radiating from him in waves. She turned on him like fire. Don't. He stopped short, chest rising and falling. You walked out. You put me on display, Silas. Again. Only this time instead of being your fake girlfriend, I got to be your real-life redemption arc in front of every billionaire in Manhattan. His brow furrowed. I wasn't trying to. You didn't ask me. You just decided. Like I'm a symbol. A name to slap on your rebranding campaign. You think this was about optics? I don't know what this is about, she yelled, heels still in one hand, gesturing like it was a weapon. I'm not used to this. To grand gestures and glittery declarations and being told I'm someone's chaos like it's the damn climax of a romance movie. I meant every word. She laughed, sharp and broken. You're not supposed to be good at speeches, remember? You're the cold one. The careful one. The one who keeps everything behind glass and steel. He stepped forward. Not with you. And that's the part that terrifies me. Her voice cracked on that last word. And suddenly, she was blinking fast, trying to keep tears from escaping. Her hand shot out before she even realized it, heels sailing toward his chest. Silas caught it, barely. Blinked down at it, stunned. Did you just throw your shoe at me? I have another one, she growled, already lifting her foot. But before she could hurl the second, he was in front of her, grabbing her, kissing her so hard she forgot her own damn name. His mouth was fire and confession, his hands cupping her face like she might vanish if he let go. She melted into him, clutching his shirt, her body betraying every inch of her pride. When they pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Roxy. Her eyes fluttered shut. I love your fire. Your sharp tongue. Your chaos. I love the way you laugh when you think no one's watching, the way you fill a room with too much and somehow make it not enough. I've never needed anything in my life the way I need you. She was quiet. Then, soft, almost embarrassed. You really named a foundation after me? He smiled. That was just the beginning. You're impossible. I know. She sighed and let herself lean into him, heart pounding against his chest. So now what? Now, he murmured, brushing his lips over her temple, I take you home. The limo was dark. Warm. Too quiet. They sat across from each other for all of 60 seconds before Roxy climbed into his lap, hands in his hair, lips devouring his with the kind of kiss that spoke of missed chances and build-up ache. His jacket hit the floor first. Then her clutch. Then her gown loosened, sliding down her body like it had been waiting for this moment. You ruined my lipstick, she whispered against his jaw. I'll buy you 10 more. Cocky. In love. He pushed her back gently onto the leather seat, his mouth trailing fire down her neck, his hands exploring familiar curves like he hadn't already mapped every inch. Her legs wrapped around him. She tugged at his belt with a growl. You're mine now, Vale. He kissed her again, deeper, filthier. I always was. The windows fogged, the city blurred. And somewhere between tangled limbs and half-whispered promises, Roxy realized she didn't need safe or simple. She just needed him. 1 year later, the city still buzzed like a live wire beneath their feet, but everything had changed. Roxy Lane stood at the front of a packed community center in Brooklyn, sunlight spilling through wide glass windows onto a stage that had seen more fundraisers and dance-offs than fancy suits and champagne. Her red heels tapped against the hardwood floor as she adjusted the mic, her black jeans hugging curves the crowd knew better than some of their own family members. Behind her, the banner read, The Lane Foundation, for women, by women. The applause was thunderous as she finished her thank you speech, voice cracking just slightly on the words, we did this together. Because they had. What had started as a fake relationship, a revenge plot, and one absurdly good kiss had become the most real thing in her life. She stepped down from the stage into the arms of a man who didn't usually do public affection, but for her, Silas Vale wrapped one arm around her waist and kissed the side of her temple without hesitation. He looked different now. Still devastating in a suit, but there was a softness in his eyes, a curve to his mouth that hadn't existed before she walked into his world and flipped the table over. He let her lead the spotlight now. He stood just behind her, not as the puppet master pulling strings, but as her partner. Her biggest backer. Her calm. Well, mostly calm. That night, she found herself back where it all started. Thorn Rooftop Bar. Same soft lighting. Same overpriced drinks. Different woman. She stepped onto the rooftop in a leather jacket over a silky red dress, curls tumbling down her back, eyes searching for him even though she knew exactly where he'd be. Silas stood at the edge of the terrace, one hand in his pocket, his black shirt rolled up at the sleeves, watching the skyline like it owed him something. She walked up behind him. You know, she murmured, you're a little less broody these days. He turned, slow smile spreading. Don't ruin my reputation. You ruined it the second you donated $1 million to a puppy rescue in my name. He shrugged. They were sad puppies. She rolled her eyes and leaned against the railing beside him, shoulder brushing his. So why the trip down memory lane? I figured it was time we finished what we started. Roxy's brow furrowed. What we started? Silas turned to her fully, stepping back just enough to reach into his pocket. And then, he dropped to one knee. Right there, under the same stars, surrounded by the ghosts of who they used to be. Roxy's heart stopped. He held up a black velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that sparkled like a sin. Not dainty. Not delicate. It was bold. Loud. Her. No contracts this time, Silas said, voice low but steady. No pretending. Just chaos, fire, and forever. She blinked hard, lips trembling. You serious? Deadly. She stared at him, at the man who once built walls so high even he couldn't see over them. The man who had let her burn them all down, brick by brick. The man who now knelt before her with his heart wide open. And suddenly, she was laughing. Bright and loud and Roxy. You know I'm going to make your life hell, right? I'm counting on it. Fine, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks as she tugged him up by the collar and kissed him so hard the crowd around them forgot how to breathe. But only if I get a say in the cake. Deal, he whispered against her lips. As long as I get forever. They stood there for a long time, wrapped up in each other, the city humming below, the sky stretched above, and a new chapter already writing itself in the sparks between them. Roxy Lane and Silas Vale, still opposites. Still ridiculous. Still madly in love. Real. Raw. Reckless. And, finally, home. The end.
Thank you so much for watching. All my stories are written by me, and I hope you enjoy them. I upload new videos daily, so I hope you'll hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'd also love to hear what you think about this story in the comments, and feel free to tell me what kinds of stories you'd like me to bring to the channel in the future.